Hey, this is Sunday night. It's the first Sunday in June. You're on the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse, your host, your guide for the next 2 hours or however long it takes. I've been fussing here with the Facebook stream. Keep advertising, we're going to do it. Got it last week. It worked really well. I just don't know why it's not working today, but that's that. We've got to move on, as they say. That's the wrong glasses. No wonder I can't see right. Look at all these issues. Don't get old. We got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about all the things that are happening in the world. I got an article on Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn has kind of drifted off into the sunset. He's back. He is now the illustration of a point that I want to try to make as he outed himself this past week. Also got a lesson in a forgotten biblical principle. This is a fairly lengthy discussion. I think it'll be something that will be educational. We'll dig into that a little bit, and we're going to define born again Christians. I don't know why we have to keep doing this, but it seems that we really have to do this. Other people can't get it. And I guess this is part and parcel of end times phenomena. People like to talk to you about the end times and all these things that are happening. This is the kind of thing that's really going on. The church is coming unglued. They're introducing all these other kinds of things. They're becoming the standard bearers and the benchmarks and the doctrines. And that's what's going on. It's just weakening the system all the way down the line. We're also going to look at why we don't like God's Word. We don't really. And I'll tell you why. And then we're going to take a peek at Reformation Summer. You know what Reformation Summer is? This is 2017. 500 years ago, in the end of October, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. And we're going to tell you how they're going to honor that this summer, what they're going to do. It's really interesting. And then if my voice holds out and we have the time, we're going to see former FBI Director Comey being interviewed, questioned in Congress. I believe that's going to happen this week, and someone has gone back into the sequence of events and explained how all this was coming together, and it's really interesting. If I don't get a chance to do it, I'll post it on the blog, because I think you need to have it in front of you this week as we get into that kind of thing. Jerusalem police this week were on high alert for the first Friday prayers of the month-long Muslim holiday called Ramadan. Thousands of Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza poured into the capital city of Jerusalem this week to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's the Dome of the Rock in the center of Jerusalem's religious life. It's an interesting event. This is going to go throughout the month. I did run into one article that said that there was somebody, I've forgotten who it was now, that had an accident and they needed medical help, but it was Ramadan, and the Muslim doctors weren't allowed to work, and so they couldn't do anything for her. And I don't know if that's true. It could be. It's one of those crazy things. We talked last week about President Trump's first overseas trip. This week there were a number of follow-up issues. You probably paid attention to some of them. He had made nice with the Saudi princes, and he seemed to have won them over. They signed an agreement, the Saudis did, to buy billions of dollars worth of military hardware from us. Some on the left are not crazy about them buying military hardware. But the Donald is, and I think it's a wise thing to do. Well, they might be arming against. No, they have their problems. They're scared to death of Iran, and they need to defend themselves and not depend on us. He also encouraged Israel's President Netanyahu and yelled at the Palestinian Abbas, antagonized the European Union that tried to pat him on his head. The Pope ushered him into a side door and gave him a lecture and a little cutesy, and he convinced German Chancellor Merkel there was no hope. It was a wonderful trip. This week we learned that the U.S. is no longer involved in the Paris Accords. Did you see that? On the lawn there at the White House. This is the global warming scam that stops us from mining coal, requires us to pay third world countries a bounty, raises our costs and destroys our jobs, among other things, in order to presumably lower the temperature of the planet by 2 degrees Celsius. Well, it's because of global warming. That's really, surely it's coming, right? Maybe. The left doesn't understand. And the right is just giddy with a president and an administration that appears to finally get it. Global warming is a social construct. It's not a scientific fact. We've been footing the bill for years for the rest of the world, so others would be free to do as they will. Several coal mines are due to open this week here in the United States. Some of them are brand new. Tens of thousands of dollars once again being pumped into the economy in these dying towns across America. This week on the Bible Forum, we'll also take a look at some of the more connected issues, connected that is to the Bible and the biblical social model. The Pope's opinion on the violence that stalks this world. French President Macron's adolescent behavior. It's going to come back to bite him. German Chancellor Merkel's life lesson at the EU meetings. Homeland Security's director's despair over global violence. How a growing number of people hear from God. And a lesson on one of life's vital truths. The Donald finished up his trip, and we saw some of the things that he did. We were fascinated with the way he handled himself. And now as he moves on, we've got some fallout, and we've got some other things that portend a brighter future. At the same time, we all want peace. Last July, arriving in France just after a pious Muslim had slit the throat of an elderly priest, the Pope commented saying, all religions want peace. Can I get an amen? A month later, on the flight home from World Youth Day, he delivered this to the court press. He says, I don't like to speak of Islamic violence because every day when I browse the newspapers, I see violence right here in Italy. The one who has murdered his girlfriend, another who has murdered the mother-in-law. And these are baptized Catholics, but they're very violent Catholics. And so if I speak of Islamic violence, I must speak of Catholic violence. Religion is like a fruit salad. There's everything in it. And he says, I believe in pretty much every religion there is, has a small group of fundamentalists. What does he mean by fundamentalists? Well, the implication here is that if you're a fundamentalist, you are staunchly holding on to the fundamental beliefs, doctrines, and practices of your faith. And according to the Pope last summer, if you're doing that, you are exhibiting radical and perhaps violent expressions of that faith. So, a good Catholic can ignore confession, can ignore the Mass. I don't think so. Aren't they the fundamentals of their faith? Isn't it amazing how people can say the strangest things with the straightest faces? And the world is, oh, he said something important. It was silly. France's new president, Emmanuel Macron, said he was ready for this moment of truth in his introduction and dealings with Donald Trump, especially as they sat next to one another and reached over and shook hands. Did you see him shaking hands with Donald Trump? He told the French weekly Journal du Dimanche, I guess I'm not French, quote, "You have to show you won't make little concessions, even symbolic ones." And the footage is of a handshake where the pair met for lunch at the U.S. Embassy in Brussels just before the NATO summit last Thursday. The cameras rolled and Macron grabbed hold of Trump's hand and squeezed as hard as he could. Now, Donald is notorious for having what's called a power grip. When he shakes hands, he shakes firm hands. And the French president was going to out-Trump Trump. And the picture we have is of them going at this thing, and finally Donald just opening his hand wide. I'm not doing anything. And the Frenchman's mouth is clenched and his eyes are fixed, and he's still hanging on. You remember when stuff like that happened to you in high school? He said later, my handshake with him, it wasn't innocent. It's not the be-all and end-all of a policy, but it was a moment of truth. I don't miss a thing. He said, that's how you get respect. Yeah, I remember that kind of comment too. But it was high school, and it was immature then. I don't know where this is going to take him. After spending time with President Trump last week, Chancellor Merkel told a crowded election rally, quote, "The times in which we could completely depend on others are on the way out. We Europeans truly have to take our fate into our own hands. While Germany and Europe would strive to remain on good terms with America and Britain, we have to fight for our own destiny. And special emphasis is needed on warm relationships between Berlin and the newly elected French president, Emmanuel Macron." Message? I have met President Trump, and I don't like what I saw. Apparently she had just come from the G7 summit where no decision was made having to do with the 2015 Paris Accord on climate control. It was apparently a vote that was 6-1 against Trump being the one. 6 of them wanted to move forward. Trump said, let me think about it. And of course, this week we saw what he was thinking. He's treated that he would reveal whether or not the U.S. would stick to the global emissions, and he followed through on that promise. And now we are not in it at this moment, to the chagrin of all of these liberals and all of these climate fanatics and all the rest of them. He just simply wants the other NATO countries to honor their repeated pledges to finance their own military protection, to put up 2% of their nation's GDP in military. He also wants some of these other countries that are getting a free ride at our expense to put in some money or to show something of a serious nature. India, China, other third world nations. It's a money grab. It's a redistribution of wealth. It appears the United States cares more about their survival than they do. They being willing to let us go it alone until decisions need to be made, and then they want a seat at the table. Well, Donald Trump's a businessman. He declared our trade policy with Germany as one-sided. He said they sell too many cars to the U.S. And Chancellor Merkel is running for another re-election, seems to be on track to win it. And this means that she has been chancellor for over 12 years and counting. So she owns this thing. The Germany that we see today is largely the one she crafted. About a week ago Friday, Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly said that the global terror threat is worse than most people realize, saying that some people would never leave the house if they knew the truth. He noted there were 4 major terror attacks just last week in England, Egypt, the Philippines, Indonesia, and generally by the same groups. He says it's everywhere, it's constant, it's non-stop. We saw it just last night and today in Great Britain. The good news for us in America is that we have amazing people protecting us every day, he said. But it can happen here almost any time. This is the guy who has the inside information as to what's going on in the world, Homeland Security Secretary. And he said, if you knew what I know, you wouldn't leave the house. How dangerous is this world? And how much more dangerous is it going to get?